Ready, set, go!
Registration is now open for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education 2023 Annual Conference. It's in Philadelphia, December 4th through 6th, 2023, Setting the Standard, Transformation Through Accreditation. You don't want to miss it. Register now at msche.org.
Surprise!
We're taking the EdUp Experience podcast to Insights EDU. Join us for an incredible higher education marketing and enrollment management conference, February 20th to 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. I'm your guest host for this episode, Bill Pepicello. I'm the host of my own podcast, EdUp Insights, and author of the book Leadership on the Field of Play, which is available on Amazon. And today I'm filling in for our usual host, Dr. Joe Saluscio, he's taking a sick day. So I'm the substitute teacher. So everyone listen up, no spitballs, and be quiet in the classroom. Now my co-host today is Dr. Chris Matheny, who's the president of Fox Valley Technical College in Wisconsin. Chris, nice to meet you.
Glad to be with you all here.
And our very special guest today is Alicia Levi, who is the president and CEO of Reading is Fundamental, something that I think a lot of people are familiar with at a high level, and we're going to do a little deeper dive today. So, Alicia, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, as I said, Alicia is the president and CEO of Reading is Fundamental, which was established in 1966, I think, which is probably before some of you were born, but I remember it well. And so I'd like to start, Alicia, by asking you a little bit about Reading is Fundamental. You know, what do you do and why do you do it?
Well, Bill, thank you so much. You are correct. Reading is Fundamental was founded well before my time. I'm confident all of us here on the call were not quite around when it was founded, but I think it's a remarkable organization. It is the nation's leading children's literacy organization. We focus on the very important issue of children's literacy, ensuring every child has the opportunity to read, to learn, to grow. We've been doing it since 1966, and we've adapted as learning styles and students have adapted over time to ensure that we're delivering books and literacy resources to children in a format, in a way that they can engage with, because we know that reading engagement drives reading proficiency.
Well, that's terrific. And you have an interesting journey to get to this position. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be the president and CEO.
Well, I am really very honored and privileged to be at the helm of Reading is Fundamental, this brand that has impacted the lives of children across the country for over 56 years. I can honestly tell you that it's rare that I walk into an event, or I've been on airplanes, I've been overseas at work-related events, and someone will always walk up to me and say, I remember when I got my first book, I got it because Reading is Fundamental came to my school. And that is a legacy that I am really honored to continue to carry on in my role. But I have had a very interesting career path. I started my career at Discovery Communications, Discovery Channel, and where I served as the Vice President of Educational Publishing. At the time, Discovery, a media company that has recently acquired Warner Brothers and is just, a huge player, obviously, in the media space. But at the time, their focus was really on exploring your world and satisfying your natural curiosity. TLC represented the Learning Channel. back in the 90s and the early 2000s. That company has evolved certainly over time, but when I was part of the organization, my job was to extend the brand into the educational marketplace, really leveraging the power of media in the early days, really leveraging the power of media to drive learning and help students really take advantage of media in a way that we hadn't really contemplated previously. And again, I've been in this business a really long time. I'm sure a lot of people that are listening to this podcast remember the early days of media in the classroom were film strips, right? And videotapes, and then CDs and DVDs, and the evolution into streaming. But ultimately, it's about reaching kids where they are and using every tool possible to provide them with those engagement mechanisms that will help them move forward on their learning journey. So I started my career with really looking at the power of media and how media can help advance learning outcomes really for students. I spent 12 years at Discovery Channel, moved from Discovery to the Public Broadcasting Service, where I served as the head of education for PBS for many years. And then when the long-serving CEO of Reading is Fundamental decided to retire, I was really, really honored to be selected to, again, steward this brand and really and address this issue exactly. How do we bring media and print together in a kind of platform inclusive environment to ensure that we're reaching children where they live?
Great. Well, I have one follow-up, and then Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you because it seems to me I'm fascinated by bringing print and the digital world together here. But given that as the context, how do you see the state of literacy today in the United States? There's a lot of focus on the basic skills, and certainly reading is fundamental there. So what do you think about literacy?
Well, I think there's a lot of work to do. I believe that there's a literacy crisis in this country when 67% of children entering fourth grade are not reading at a proficient level. The nation's report card has been telling us this for 30 years, that children are not meeting the basic requirements that they need to really be able to be successful in their learning journey. I would, everybody listening to this podcast knows it's not about decoding necessarily. Do children recognize the letter A or B? Sure. But are they able to comprehend the information that's being put in front of them? So when they move into middle school and high school and hopefully higher education, they're reading to learn. And what RIF really focuses on, what Reading is Fundamental targets in on as part of the child's reading journey, is really integrating the science of reading, those tools that a child needs to learn to read proficiently, and the joy of reading, the real need for children to engage with reading, to see value in reading, to want to come back, because those are the fundamental building blocks, reading fundamentals that help children ultimately learn as they go through life. So I believe, and it's not just me, it's NAEP and anybody else you talk to is going to tell you that reading is the issue that if we can focus on, if we can provide that fundamental building block for learners of all ages, then they have opportunity from there. If I can read, I can learn to code. If I can read, I can do science. If I can read, I can do math. You have to have that baseline. And this is an issue that this country needs to focus on. I think in a post-COVID learning environment, coming out of COVID, I think people woke up to this problem. I mean, again, we've been singing from the rooftops about this, shouting from the rooftops about this for years, but people, I think, having experienced COVID, families trying to teach their children in remote learning environments, educators trying to advance learning outcomes for children in really less than ideal circumstances during COVID. I think everybody was exposed to the reality of this issue, and what is important for an organization like mine, a nonprofit that stays focused on its mission, is having partners who are equally committed and stay focused on this issue. And my colleague here on the call today, Sam, she works for Macy's. Macy's has been dedicated to this issue for over 20 years. They've said this is an issue. And so that's really, as we look at what needs to happen next, it's focus, it's attention, it's partnership, it's people coming in and joining on this cause.
Wow. Well, Chris, you want to jump in here with a little input?
I would love to do that. I've got a million questions for you, but there's a lot to unpack there. One of the things that I enjoy most about being a college president, though, is when people come up and share their stories of being at the college way prior to when I was here. So I'll just quickly tell you that I am one of those kids that in the early 80s was sorting through my elementary school library table looking for, the perfect book to take home. I was thinking back on that. I think I picked two. The two that stand out most in my mind were Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and a book called The Chocolate Touch, which is kind of an obscure thing. But for me, maybe I was food driven or I don't know, chocolate. Yeah, there was a theme there. But it really was, and I've said this to my kids and everybody else who will listen, those experiences early on were really fundamental. They were sparked my love of reading, and it almost didn't matter what I was reading. It was really important. So thanks to you and your organization for at least helping somebody be successful in their career. But I think about my experience, and the first thing that I wanted to ask you is, are we societally making a difference? I mean, you talked about you as RIF and other organizations have been shouting this from the rooftop for 30 years. We go back to my experience in the early 80s. What is it that would make a difference in this literacy crisis as you were talking about?
Well, it's a really great question, Chris. And I think the most important thing to say is you don't give up. We don't give up until every child reads. Every child should have the opportunity to do what you did, to recognize that they like chocolate. That's the theme I picked up, Chris, from your comment. And be able to find books or reading resources in any format that they like, that captures their attention, right? That they can take home and have a sense of ownership on. Because if you can read that, then you might read the next thing and the next thing. So with that, I guess my immediate answer is you don't give up. And you need champions, right? Leadership matters in any setting. You need leaders, you need champions, you need voices with a big footprint. Again, my friend Sam is here from Macy's. They have a huge footprint. RIF has a huge footprint. We're talking to the people on this podcast, right? About raising awareness, right? To make sure that people stay focused on this issue. Can you make a difference? I believe that you can. Do we have a long way to go? Absolutely. We haven't solved the problem. My favorite thing to tell people is it will be the happiest day of my life when I work my way out of a job, right? We don't need RIF when every child can read. Do I think it's going to happen in my lifetime? Probably not. But am I going to give up? No way. We have to bring more partners to the table. We get more people engaged. I keep thinking about, again, the importance of partnership and collective impact. And the idea that a partnership like the one that Reading is Fundamental has enjoyed with Macy's for over 20 years, that means that every customer that shops in a Macy's store is paying attention to this issue. I think that's how you start to make change. You get more people engaged. We call them literacy advocates. You keep advocating and raising awareness for the issue, and you don't give up. You stay super focused.
How do we find out where your programs are at in our local schools if we don't know that? And maybe you could just educate me on how do the books end up on the tables that the kids are sorting through? Is that a partnership between local efforts? Do you ship books to these folks? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it the logistics are always the devil's in the details as always. But core to RIF's vision for impact, our belief in why we can impact change, is because we believe that children deserve choice. They deserve access to books and literacy resources, and they deserve to choose what books they want. And that's no easy feat, right? So we have lots and lots of partnerships. One of our partnerships is with local reading coordinators and literacy advocates in communities across the country. We are active in 91% of all U.S. elementary schools. So there is an educator in every 91% of all elementary schools that is engaging with RIF in some way. We partner with publishers, right? Books are expensive. Both of you work at, institutions of higher learning. Well, you know how expensive it is to provide these kinds of print, particularly print resources. So we work very hard with the publishing community to not only ensure competitive prices, but also diversity and choice. Every child should see themselves in the books that they choose, whether they love chocolate or whether they love hair or cars or sports. There needs to be diversity and choice, and they have to see themselves in the books that they choose. That's what drives engagement. So we partner with publishing partners, Chris, to answer your question, to distribute these books into schools. We have a resource, a free website, of course, in today's digital world. We have at RIF.org, we have a destination called Literacy Central, where we have over 25,000 resources available for free to educators, to families, to school adjacent programs, anybody that's looking for tools and resources to help engage their children with reading. We have created this destination and enjoy literally millions of visits annually in partnership with our friends at Macy's. They've helped us invest in creating access beyond just the book that gets selected off of a table. So we don't do it by ourselves. We do it in partnership with local advocates on the ground in communities. The other thing I would say really quickly, Chris, to answer that question is, it's so important that we build capacity at the local level so that the culture of reading that we want to create in communities across the country is sustained once we're not there anymore. So really providing the tools and resources to those local on the ground advocates is critical. And then we partner with publishers to get those books to those schools. And we partner with partners like Macy's and individual donors who are interested in making a difference in their communities.
Wow, that's really terrific. I'm going to follow up a little bit on the whole content issue of books. As you know, there's a lot of controversy these days about content, especially at the primary and secondary levels, and what's acceptable and not acceptable. Have you inserted yourself into that conversation since you are in lots and lots of public schools?
Well, we believe in choice. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to choose their own books. In under-resourced communities and rural communities, there's one book in every 300 homes. In those communities, children do not have access to these types of resources. We are filling a need, and there's a huge gap. So how do we navigate, Bill, the politics of today, which is, banned books and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate? We provide access and we provide choice, and we put the power in the hands of the local literacy advocates to determine what books are appropriate for the children that they serve. We don't make those decisions, but we absolutely do not limit access. But those local literacy advocates are the ones that decide what are the appropriate resources for, and there's always been curation. You're always going to look at books and say, well, this book isn't appropriate for a first grader, it's for a high school reader. You're always curating to determine what the reading level is for a child. But from a content perspective, which is the hot button issue today, for us, we don't believe that you limit choice, but we do empower our local partners to decide what's appropriate for the children they serve.
Should you register for the Middle States Commission on Higher Education annual conference this December 4th through 6th in Philadelphia?
100%.
I agree, because the title of the conference is called Setting the Standard, Transformation Through Accreditation. There is no time like the present to explore opportunities in higher education and the future for our students and our business model. Get out and network with your peers this December 4th through 6th at the Middle States Commission on Higher Education annual conference.
Attention.
Are you ready to elevate your institution's marketing and enrollment strategies Join the EdUp Experience podcast at the Insights EDU conference, February 20th to 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona. Don't miss out on this opportunity to hear from engaging speakers from industry-leading companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and higher ed leaders. Learn the latest marketing and enrollment strategies to grow your programs. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.
Attention.
And I know you have an advisory board on race, equity, and inclusion. So that does play into at least part of your mission. Is that right?
Well, that's absolutely right. Equity is central to providing opportunity, right? Education should be the great equalizer. Every child in this country should have the same opportunities based on the education that they receive. But there always has to be equity. The opportunities available to children in one community are always different than what they might be in a different community. So we believe creating that equity is important. And again, as you've commented, children have to see themselves in the books that they read. They have to, that's the only thing that can drive engagement and frequency. And so we do stand up subject matter experts, advisory boards. The Race, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Board is full of subject matter experts that help us evaluate titles, ensure that we have a broad selection available. And those subject matter experts are central to our impact. And we see, as we make these books available and the supporting resources that educators need. We have this amazing webinar series, Bill, called Every Book Counts. Every book can be an art book. Every book can be a family engagement book. Every book can be a STEM book. Really creating opportunities, not just for providing access to diverse books, but also creating those resources for parents and families that create that culture of literacy that sustain reading outcomes beyond just the reading of that book.
Right. And I've got one follow-up, and then Chris, I'll throw it back to you again. You also have an advisory board on middle school family literacy. And you were just talking about the importance of all of this in the family as opposed to just the individual students. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. I think we can all agree that there's no one thing that solves the literacy crisis. There's no one solution that ensures a child at whatever age is proficient in anything, right? There are all kinds of inputs. We call them levers. We call them literacy levers, right? There's so many different things that empower a child to be able to learn and certainly to read. And what we recognize, we've heard for years, I think, Chris, it goes back to your question earlier, right? That NAEP has been reporting for 30 years, right? That over 60% of children are not entering fourth grade reading proficiently. And then we fast forward into a COVID environment where you've got kids that were in third grade still being taught to read out of a classroom for 2 years, enter back into a formal classroom setting in middle school where they haven't gotten the foundational learning that they needed to read. And you've got educators who are at a loss. They don't, middle school educators aren't trained to teach kids how to decode words or phonics or anything else. They're teaching subject matter topics, right? By the time you get to middle school, you're reading to learn. So we stood up a middle school family literacy advisory board and really focused on this issue in a post-COVID environment where we're recognizing that there's a real need to support children entering middle school who don't have the resources they need. And there is no way you solve this problem without families. How do you get parents engaged? There's not a parent out there that doesn't want the best for their kids. They just need the help. They need, tell me what I need to do. Tell me give me the resources I need. And in our society today, it's providing those tools and resources are critical. So we feel very strongly that engaging families is critical. We think in the middle school environment, it's especially critical in a post-COVID learning environment.
Great. Chris, what do you got?
Yeah, I want to follow up on just sort of the resource conversation and the format of the resources. One of the things that I was thinking about is, my own experience of getting that book and taking it home with me was not just about the content. It was about this thing that I had that was mine. Um, and I wonder, is that different experience with digital resources, or do you find differences in the efficacy of your programs based on whether or not you're giving away physical books or giving access to digital resources?
I think it's a great question. I would argue that there's not a difference in the efficacy, right? I think that, but I would suggest that that if we don't address the kind of nature of a child's kind of engagement, the environment that we live in today, by taking a kind of multi-platform approach, then we're going to lose kids. If you don't mind indulging me for a second, I have 3 children. I'm very proud of them. I will say, just as a point of personal privilege, my oldest son this fall just started his PhD program in AI and instructional learning. So a whole new area, one that I'm sure, Bill, you guys talk about on your podcast. But my oldest 2 are out of college, and my youngest girl just started high school. I have a 10-year gap. My husband and I have been married 100 years. I don't know how that happened, but we got a 10-year gap. But even in my own personal experience, that 10-year gap, the way my older children consumed information and learned, so different than the way my 14-year-old does. She is a digital native. That is not a, tagline. She consumes media so differently. She consumes print, digital, so differently than my older 2 children. That's my kind of focus group for this, but also what we experience every day. Today's learners don't think in terms of print and digital. They don't think in terms of chapter books and graphic novels, and they think in terms of information and how they consume that information. And we as educators, I believe, our challenge as we look forward is ensuring that we're meeting those kids where they are with the resources they need. So I don't think it's a question of efficacy. I think it's a question of innovation and how we capture them, how we deliver the information to them and allow them to consume it. I think this will be the question about AI, right? As we look forward.
Yeah, it's really a good point. Maybe it's just a question about how I consume media more than anything, right? I find it difficult to find my way, and I wonder if it doesn't sound like our kids of today are having that same experience in digital. I'd much rather have a physical book in front of me. Can I just shift gears a second and ask? I mean, I'm a 2-year college president. Many 2-year colleges in the country are responsible for adult literacy. We work with English language learners and other folks who maybe not had the best scholastic experience and need to finish high school. I'm wondering if you have worked on the adult literacy side of this, or if you have partnerships with colleges and universities that listeners should be aware of as they're thinking about how they kind of live their own mission to educate the public.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's such a great point. And it's also important to note, as we were talking about, there's no one thing that solves this issue. It is a continuum of learning, right? A child is not going to be reading proficient if their parents, it's going to be harder for them to be proficient in reading if their parents aren't engaged. And so many parents of children today have literacy issues themselves, right? And I think that the work that you're outlining is critical. We work very closely with adult literacy programs. Some of the resources, again, in partnership with Macy's, creating these 25,000 resources that are available for free at RIF.org. They include resources for families and parents who are not English speakers, who are not reading proficient themselves. That might mean that we have audio resources available for them, or resources available in another language. It is important that we engage at all levels of learning for these kids, and making sure that we provide the tools to create, again, that culture of literacy. So we do work with a lot of corporate partners who focus exclusively on adult literacy to create that kind of continuum of learning. We have family literacy nights that we've done in partnership with Macy's that really focus on that kind of culturally responsive environment that addresses the needs of the families that come to those events. Many of the parents that come to those events are not literate themselves. So we're mindful of how we create that event, how we structure that event, and minor things. We generally host those events with food, right? So that becomes dinner, right, for a family. And those are the kinds of approaches that we take and the way we think about our work to again, like any other organization, we target our audience, we create solutions based on our audience's needs, and then hopefully that creates that kind of sustainability that we're looking for. But adult literacy is a critical element of children's literacy for sure.
Yeah, I think, when we GED and HSED grads, when we ask them why they do it, the most common answer is not for themselves, it's for their kids, right? And they want to show their kids that it's possible. I would imagine that the family literacy kinds of activities are very, very similar.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up a little bit on your own personal experience, Alicia, with your kids, because you're living something that, because you talked about being married 100 years. Well, I've been in higher education 100 years, as Joe Solucio is always telling people. But while I was at the University of Phoenix, we saw over a 25-year span the move from print to digital. And we moved from classroom to online experience. We had the first digital library. We digitized all the course materials and textbooks. And so we witnessed how people did, or sometimes didn't, make that transition into the technologically advanced world. And it looks like you've got a laboratory right there at home where you can see the difference. And it's interesting for me because obviously I grew up before there was an internet or any kind of digital world out there. Books were my friends. I had thousands of books in my lifetime. And now to see the Kindles come along and all of the which I admit I use, but there's still nothing like holding a book in your hand, I have to say. So it's really interesting for me to hear what your experience is there.
Bill, if you don't mind, I do think that's the challenge, right, for educators going forward. I think we all experienced this in COVID as well. The learning environment matters, right? And that's, at Reading is Fundamental, we definitely think about it as a platform inclusive environment. There's no one solution because every learner, I think, learns differently. So all the work, and I'm very familiar with the work that you and your teams and organizations across the country did to kind of digitize, right, a learning environment. But it was a huge lift, right? And we're still evolving, right? Because every child doesn't, a remote learning environment is not perfect for everybody. An in-person learning environment, right, needs customization. And I think that when I think about it, it's really about it's not about the platform so much as how do you reach kids that in a way that optimizes their learning environment, and making sure that you've got the tools in multiple formats to do it.
Yeah, I agree. That's really key. Chris, you want to jump in here before I start to wrap things up?
I'm just curious if maybe, Alicia, you can share with us. I mean, you said 90% or 91% of all elementary schools. How many student touches does that equate to? How many books are you distributing a year? What are the big grand numbers? I'm just kind of curious as to what those look like.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, we touch about 25 million children a year in print and digital format. We do that through, again, 25,000 resources available through the amazing work that we've done in partnership with Macy's in communities across the country. We distribute millions of books in print and digital format. And again, for us, it's been an evolution for us as well. We don't just think in terms of books. We think in terms of resources as well. How does my 14-year-old consume information in bite-sized chunks? Let me tell you, it's a, it can be a leveled reading solution. It can be a reading passage. It can be graffiti right on the side of a building. It can also be a book. So ensuring that we have multiple solutions to meet multiple learning styles. But 25 million children a year is how many we reach. In our 20-year really partnership with Macy's and their customers have contributed $46 million. I'm going to say that again, $46 million over 20 years to invest in exactly what we've been talking about here. We've distributed over 15 million books in partnership with Macy's. That's reaching children in the hardest hit communities across the country with solutions. It's engaging customers in every Macy's store across the country. It's building digital solutions, Chris, that again reach kids, and that's how we reach 91% of U.S. elementary schools. That's a reading specialist in Poughkeepsie needing a resource to help engage parents in her community. And those resources are available to her just by going to RIF.org. But we reach about 25 million kids a year on an annual basis.
Great.
Amazing. We'd be remiss if we didn't ask you the following question, and that is, how can people participate in Reading is Fundamental?
Well, we love literacy advocates. We engage with them every day. They can always make a donation. There's never not a need for additional support. So visiting RIF.org and becoming a literacy advocate, contributing to the cause is one great way. But also there are things that we can all do every day, right? In our own homes, in our own communities, that can make a difference. Certainly if you've got a child in your life, reading aloud is so critical to long-term sustainable outcomes for reading. So absolutely, picking up a book and reading to a child is something that they can do. You can always visit RIF.org and engage, be a volunteer. Certainly, again, I'll say donate, participate in that way. Visit a Macy store and talk to the amazing people that work in Macy stores across the country. They are our frontline partners, right? To encourage people to continue to participate in this cause. Their Mission Every One program is really dedicated to making a difference in communities every day. And so those are just a handful of ways that people can participate.
Great. Now, we always end these podcasts with two questions. The first is, what have we not asked you that you'd like to say about Reading is Fundamental, anything that we've missed? And then secondly, how do you see higher education moving forward, and what impact do you think you'll have on it?
Well, I'll take the second one first. I think my legacy will be my son getting his PhD in AI. I think that I think you've asked a lot of great questions. If there was anything that I would add, right, what you haven't asked is maybe, actually, I can't think of anything. What can I do to help? Why is this an issue? How do we stay focused? I think we've covered a lot here. But for higher education, I think education is power. I think we all agree with that, right? Knowledge is something that we should embrace. And the more children that are going through their early learning years who are empowered with reading are more likely to make the journey, continue the journey, decide that they want to continue to learn. I think that for us, the more we can advocate for the cause, the more we can recognize that if a child can read, it's the most sustainable investment we can make. If a child can read, then the opportunity is there for anything. So I think those are the things that I would focus on.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank my co-host today, Dr. Chris Matheny, the president of Fox Valley Technical College. Thanks very much, Chris.
Been my pleasure.
And our special guest today was Alicia Levy, who's the president and CEO of Reading is Fundamental. Everybody go to that website, check it out. As I said, I remember it from the beginning. So, and with that, I will thank you both very much. And ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Oh, yeah.
The Middle States Commission on Higher Education 2023 Annual Conference is in Philadelphia, December 4th through 6th. Setting the standard, transformation through accreditation. Remember, only you can create transformation through networking, knowledge sharing, opportunity, leadership, service, learning, and accreditation. And you'll do all those things at the Middle States Commission on Higher Education Annual Conference this December 4th through 6th. Can't wait to be there. EdUp will be there. There's going to be over 1,300 attendees, presidents, provosts. The networking opportunities are off the chain. Register now at msche.org.
Oh, yeah.
Attention higher ed marketing and enrollment management professionals. We are taking the EdUp Experience podcast to Insights EDU. Join us at Insights EDU on February 20th to 22nd, 2024 in Phoenix, Arizona. Gain insight into the latest higher education trends and cutting-edge marketing strategies that'll take your institution's enrollment to a whole new level. This is your opportunity to connect with higher education leaders and marketing experts from across the country. Comprehensive presentations, engaging panel discussions, and more. Insights EDU will equip you to position your institution for growth. Register now at insightsedu.com and use the code EdUp to save $50 off your registration. Can you afford to miss this conference?
I don't think so.